firstly, thank you everybody for being so generous with your time and joining me on this webinar, where what I'm hoping to do is spend some time looking at, how CRM and digital marketing combined can be used to raise AUM. And ultimately, whether you're a salesperson on this call, whether you are a marketing professional, whoever you are, the most important thing when you're working at a fund is how can you identify new investments? How can you be alerted to any kind of redemption risks? And if you're into digital marketing, well, that's what we at Profundcom are all about. We work with, a whole bunch of financial institutions, from hedge funds to private banks to asset managers. And yes, we do everything that Pardot does. Yes, we do everything that Marketo does, and some more. But what we've really built our product around is the ability for people to use digital marketing to raise assets. And that has been, the background. If you look at our product strategic narrative, it is less about what the tech does. It's more how can salespeople can actually, target investment, and marketing teams can actually see the impact that their activities are having on raising AUM as well as preserving it. So that's a brief about Profundcom. A little bit about myself. What did I do during lockdown? Well, I tried to learn how to play the guitar, but I actually wrote a book, and it's about my learnings in the last 20 years around marketing to the invisible investor. And I'll come to what the invisible investor is all about. But what is bizarre about Amazon is that you can buy a secondhand book from me, signed, albeit, for £100, but you can actually get the hardcover at a 40% discount at £40. But there's an offer at the end of this, which is, if you just email me, I can just send you the book. So there you go. So that's kind of a little bit about Profundcom, about the company, and why I thought this webinar would be interesting to the people we invited. So moving on, what's changed in 2021? I'm sure you've seen this. I'm sure you've seen this cartoon. Are people resistant to change? I think we are kind of embracing it. There is an urge to maybe go back to what it was and kind of ignore digital transformation, but it is coming, and especially to managers of a certain, I would say of a certain age, maybe, of a certain digital exposure. What we've kind of been pushing into the C-level is people are kind of becoming aware. And the reason people are becoming aware is because what's changed is that the way people are consuming information has changed in 2021. And at one stage, it was all webinars and Zoom and websites. What's happened recently is people are actually more interested in consuming information via email. And that is a real behavioral change. And it's a behavioral change because even if you think about where we are today, and obviously I'm grateful for everybody who signed up to this webinar, but in the past, our attention was not taken by Zoom meetings. Our attention was not taken by webinars. And it was hardly ever taken by anything like that. And when this change happened, we were all engrossed in Zoom and in webinars. But again, there's kind of a secondary effect that's occurred, which is we're kind of going back to just claiming back our time. And that's the same with people we're trying to sell to prospects, to investors, is that they've kind of gone through this as well. And what they're finding is they're finding the ability that, the information that they want via email is around product strategy, innovation, market perspective, and kind of the other stuff. But at the same time, what they're also saying is the frequency is almost as needed. And this is the real change in behavior, because traditionally we said, well, we'll send emails on a Tuesday at 2 p.m. and we'll just send emails out then because that's the world we live in. COVID's happened. And actually, whilst a marketing agency will say there's lots of channels to do marketing on, it seems like email is kind of taking some attention share from these other channels. Not that they're not important, but it's worth remembering. And it's worth remembering because, again, the cycle will come where you're going to have to look at other digital channels. So I thought I'll just put that up there to say, you know, email is making a comeback. And I don't know how many people agree with that, how many disagree. Just let me know as we go through it, if that's something you've seen as well. So whilst that's the case with emails, what is kind of in a kind of paradoxically, the investor journey and how they find you has completely changed. And this is, again, where the investor, that's kind of the title of my book, you know, the invisible investor, is that, you know, right now, the investor can find you through thought leadership, through your website, through events, through social media, through the press, through your inbound and outbound marketing. So suddenly, the role of marketing is actually so much more part of the sales process. And, you know, if you looked at the traditional funnel, what kind of went in the funnel was all about the leads that marketing was generating. Well, as you know, we are at the point of where we are today, marketing is almost as part of the business as sales, as is risk control, as is anything else. So I believe that, you know, as we move forwards, marketing is slowly being seen as something very core to the operation of the business. So as important as back-end systems, as is sales. So with that in mind, and with the fact that, you know, the investor journey has become completely digital, it's the juxtaposition between email being popular, so do we just do email, or do we go down all these various channels, these other digital channels? And I hope I've used the word juxtaposition correctly there. So that's where I believe the world is today. That's a lot of feedback that we get from the clients we work with, the prospects we talk to, other industry experts in this field. So CRM and digital marketing, what is the integration? What does it look like? Well, if you're anybody who's anybody, you've got a CRM system. And if you're in the hedge fund space, it'll be CapTech, Backstop, Folio, Dynamo. If you're kind of in the asset management space, slightly bigger, you know, Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics. And what you'll have is contact data, but my particular favorite is the data that's in there that nobody knows how it got in there. And, you know, I don't know if you ever open your CRM and you think about that, you know, we try and be clean with our CRM, and we definitely get that. And what's quite interesting is, and I've kind of seen this being in the industry, you know, 25 years, is that every 7 years, an organization will change their CRM. And it's cyclical, right? So you have a CRM, you have all these visions of grandeur, and then suddenly 7 years later, it's not doing what it's meant to do. And, you know, what is also really interesting, and I was just speaking to the guys at Marketo about this, and the guys at Marketo said, there is no CRM has built a decent emailing tool, ever. So they'll do an email, it won't do bulk email, it won't do, you know, customized email. So what happens, right? Salesforce goes out and buys Market Cloud, they go out and buy Pardot. Adobe go out and buy Marketo. And the guy I was talking to is actually a founder of Marketo, right? So he's, you know, I don't know, that deal was 2 billion. And then MailChimp sold for 5 billion. So it's almost like CRM companies have got no ability to build a great email platform. And if you kind of think about it, if your investors and prospects are consuming information, you know, more and want to consume information from emails, well, immediately there's a slight downside to whatever CRM system you have. Well, and as the digital journey progresses, what you'll find is that you're in a position where no CRM out of the box gives you the ability to track the invisible investor. It doesn't give you the ability to track social. It doesn't give you the ability to track your investor portal, the webinars you're running, events you're running, the content you're generating, the SEO and paid ads, none of that. So what you end up doing, you take your CRM, you build your CRM, you then say, right, I've spent all my money doing that. Now what I need is I need to find a product. Could be Profundcom, could be Adobe, could be Marketo, could be any of these ones, could be Pardot. And now I've got to plumb this all together. And I've got to assume that the people I'm paying to do all of this actually understand my business. And, you know, the level of dissatisfaction we see in that process, the products are fantastic. The people are fantastic that build it, but just understanding the process that goes into pulling all this data together. We spoke to somebody recently and they said, for every channel we integrate, we lose 15 to 20% efficiency in our processes. So from a marketing team, they end up becoming a software team. And at the end, by the time they've plumbed in 6 different channels, it's almost as if, why bother? Because no one's getting the benefit. And the real downside to having these systems that are totally not integrated and haven't been built to do so is the ultimate challenge of having what we call investor centricity. So you know everything about your investor, from what they're interested in, you know, their journey through your digital landscape, whether it's your website, you know, your social, your emails, what they're going to buy, their investor profile, what does their success look like, is actually impossible to work out. Because what you're unable to do is that you're unable to create a journey for a customer, for an investor, based on their perspective. So if you don't have that data to hand, all the analytic information that turns into magic, knowing when someone is going to invest, is so disparate. By the time you've put it all together, it's already, you know, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months out of date. So that is the real challenge, is how do you bring CRM and how do you bring digital marketing together? So one, you can identify where the sales team have the opportunity to target the investor. Secondly, where potentially an investor is kind of potentially looking to leave. And thirdly, their journey across everything you're doing. So you can actually pick out what are the things, this particular type of investor is that point, that tipping point where they're going to either invest, not invest, and more importantly, if they're an existing investor, what else could, you know, they be sold? So this kind of behavioral science element to the investor process, which people like, you know, Amazon and eBay do incredibly well, Etsy are doing it incredibly well as well, is somehow lost. And whilst, you know, the reason why, you know, this failed is most marketing people think, well, I know a little bit of, you know, workflow programming, or I know a little bit of Excel. It's actually, it's almost like that Kruger effect, where a little bit of knowledge, you actually think you actually, you know, you kind of think you've got more expertise than you do. This is actually a behavioral science problem and a problem of, you know, mathematics. But at the same time, what mustn't be lost when you're doing this is not to get caught up in the analytics and the workflow, is to really understand the magic of the marketing you're doing, the brand awareness you're creating, and more importantly, the subjective value that you're creating about your fund, your offerings, and what makes you different. And, you know, if there was nothing you ever did, and if you took nothing away from today's webinar, if whatever you do focuses on differentiating what you do as a firm, what you do as an individual in that firm, and kind of taking that left field position, that is probably more benefit than anything else. And the reason for that is, you know, when we go and talk to heads of marketing, CMOs who move between jobs, they will always buy the same products. So it'll be Salesforce, Pardot, Seismic, a fact sheet tool, you know, Salesforce, Marketo, and they just do that. And the problem with that is because they're doing the same thing, they'll end up in the same place. And whilst things are very logical, what things that sound logical, so what Marketing 101 teaches you is what your competitors are doing, right? But it's almost worth working out, what can I do that's different? Because if I do something different, the risk is higher. You'll probably lose your job if you get it wrong, but the rewards of being different means you'll end up somewhere else. And that is, the real trick of being a marketer. A marketer is, if you want to be an institutional marketer for the rest of your life, pay your school fees, retire, said I worked in a big firm or worked in a firm, yeah, just buy big brands, because what that will ultimately do is you won't get fired for buying Salesforce or, Dynamics or whatever. But it's almost, as a marketer, as that creative in you, because, most people became marketers because, I'm a marketer and I aspire to Steve Jobs, I aspire to Pablo Picasso, I aspire to Dali. Those are the guys I aspire to. And they were different. And you remember different people. And that's the thing. And if you can just go back to your roots, leave the corporate mumbo jumbo behind and act, that thing, I don't remember what it's exactly, but it says, dance like nobody's looking, and just going back to, when we were encumbered by, the things that make us have to pay our bills, get back to that creative of marketing. And really just, you may not be able to get away with it, but try in small experiments to see if you could do something outlandish. And again, in the fund world, what's outlandish? We at Profundcom, we've seen customers who do some fairly outlandish stuff, like the guys from London and Capital are rowing the Atlantic. Nothing to do with fundraising, right? But there are more people who've climbed Everest and done that. So interesting, right? So it is about being, CRM is great, digital marketing is great, but bringing that together is the challenge. And whilst, like I said, you can get drowned in analytics, is to not lose the magic. Just got a quick question coming. Does the CDP support in capturing these insights to information? Yeah, I think Dion, it does, and I'll come back to that at the end. That's a really good question. So where do you start? Okay, where do you start? So obviously I've kind of gone on about this. The simplest place to start, once you've kind of worked out your marketing philosophy, is the kind of workflows you build. And hopefully from here, the first thing to do is make sure you've got your channels sorted, which was in the previous section. This is kind of the workflows you need to be thinking about. Now, some of you guys might be doing this already, which is fantastic. Nurture campaigns. If there's nothing you're not doing, then the first thing to do is nurture campaigns. And nurture campaigns are all about, if people are leaving you some information, whether they've registered for a webinar, whether they've accessed a particular thought leadership piece on your website, have a way where you can send them valuable content. Valuable content, not for you, but for them. And a nurture camp, like for us, we send information out to say, how do you harness digital marketing? Part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. And they get this sent in an email. And it's one of those things is that we've found this to be incredibly useful with our clients as well, just to create some form of front of mind thought leadership. So the great thing about fund marketing is that no one just will ring you up. No one's going to ring up Oldfield Partners today and say, hey, I would like to invest 100 million with you. It just won't happen. We're in the business of the long tail sales cycle. So, it takes potentially, and Harvard Business School say this, so must be right, 7 to 11 touches. So, you can't do that. You have to build automation into this. You can't sit down and generate these emails out. So having a workflow that creates this kind of curated content, or appears to be curated, personalized content, is really, really useful. So as a start, if you've got a website, if you've got content, if you're getting people's email addresses, obviously GDPR compliant, this is a really good place to start. The second thing to look at is, once you've kind of gone through that part of your journey, what's the next workflow to build? Well, if you're using a CRM, please tell me that you're using lead scoring. And if you are using lead scoring, it is probably one of those things that allows a salesperson to not just blindly open a CRM, but to actually go into the CRM and actually see who are the contacts that are engaging with, you know, your firm, your brand, your products, your funds, and what is their behaviors. So if you look on this slide, this is our product running in Salesforce, and it's telling a salesperson who their low-hanging fruit is. And low-hanging fruit is people who are actively engaging with you over digital, but in this case, Benjamin hasn't spoken to them. We've got a cross-selling report, and the cross-selling report is investors who are looking at funds they're not invested in. Redemption risk are investors who are not reading stuff, and marketing alpha are all those people who have not engaged with your website, investor portal, emails for the last 6 months, but in the last month have started engaging with you. And what this is doing, it's ultimately pulling out the undervalued contacts in your database. Because the contacts that you're talking to, they're valued because you're talking to them every day. And what this is doing, it's kind of surfacing or, you know, taking out the noise of all the digital activity, putting them in buckets, and then giving the salesperson the ability to, on a particular day, work out who are the people they can target that's going to actually have, who are actually interested in what they're going to be talking about. And if you talk about, you know, what do salespeople fear the most? They don't fear calling people. They fear the first 2 minutes of a call, knowing, you know, do I know anything about this person? Do I have to ask them about the football, the weather, you know, how are they going with lockdown? With this, it gives a salesperson that additional alpha, that additional edge when they're calling them up. And, you know, what has been quite interesting, just going back to the previous slide, is that this in itself, when we started Profundcom 20 years ago, was the one thing the product was bought on. And even today, our biggest business comes from customers who are happy to change whatever they have to actually get the ability to generate this report. Now, there are two parts of this report, by the way. One, people ask, how long does it take to generate that report? Like how much plumbing is involved? It comes out of the box. And the reason it's different for us is because, and why, you know, how we do it, and I'm not trying to pitch our product, is because we've done it for 200 people. So we know that's what pretty much everybody wants. So that's how we built it. And, you know, and if you're a big firm, you know, you can get somebody to build this for you. If you're not, you know, that's kind of the world we live in. So that's kind of one workflow that's worth looking at, lead scoring. The third before that is nurturing. The second thing, and this is where another really, really powerful workflow, is the workflow about increasing events and on calls. So this is where a very underutilized workflow, but an incredibly powerful and easy one to implement, is where you send an invite out and you sit back and wonder, wow, who's going to come to my event? Are people going to make this call or not? And this workflow is probably our number one workflow. And this workflow is send out a campaign across multiple channels, see if people opened or not. If someone did not open the communication, that doesn't just have to be email, send it to them again, but maybe change the topic, change the content. The next thing you can do, if somebody opened the invite, but clicked on the link, but did not register, send them another communication. And those that did not open the link, but opened the invite, remail them again with a slightly different message. Now, it almost seems like common sense, right? But the reason I use these dots is Steve Jobs used to say, it's all about joining dots. And when we've spoken to clients of ours who use our event manager, which has this built in, they say we're getting 20 to 30% more attendance by having this remail, and it's called remailing, this remail workflow, to our webinars and it's almost as if, because it's automated, it's almost we just see, you know, the event registration ticker just continuing to grow day in, day out. So that is, you know, and especially as a marketer, if now you're running multiple events, you know, it just takes that load off you, because, you know, when it comes to, you know, demonstrating as a marketer the impact you're having on AUM, it's these little tweaks that make the difference and how you join the dots. And, you know, talking about joining the dots, the really interesting thing I found out the other day was that the first flushing toilet was invented in 1750. It took 100 years for it to be mainstream. And the reason? It took 100 years to invent toilet paper. Once they did that, dots are joined. And the same with ice cream, right? Ice cream has been there since the time of the Egyptians. We've only had ice cream cones in the last 80 years, just joining the dots, right? And that's the thing. We love to make things complex, because if it's complex and busy and it's taken me time to do, and there's lots of things going on, that makes me clever, that makes me intelligent, but you're not being a Dali, you're not being a Picasso, you're not being a Steve Jobs, a creative, joining the dots. So that's why linking that out of the creative brain of the marketer to what I'm talking about now is so critical. And that's not something a data science would pick up. A behavioral scientist would, but not a data scientist. And I know because I've got a son that's a data scientist and he doesn't even tidy his room. So that's one. The next part to this is what happens afterwards. And when you're using things like Asset TV, Bright Talk, or even Zoom, is then the ability to split that data out into who's attended the event, who watched the replay, and who didn't. And from that, you can basically build an automation that updates the CRM. And that's what, funny enough, we do and a bunch of our clients do. And then automatically, whether somebody's attended or watched the replay, to then create a sales activity. So it gets to the point where a salesperson or relationship manager doesn't even have to go into the analytics. And our friends at Martin Curry and Franklin Templeton do this. It goes straight into the activities for their salesperson. So the salesperson is already automatically following up. And what the interesting thing is, at the end of the week, the head of sales can actually look is how many automation generated calls have been followed up on. And again, it's actually building up that mythical ROI on marketing, is how much of my marketing dollars has actually led to a salesperson making a call. So that's another really, really powerful workflow. So that's workflows. So once we've kind of done, you know, putting the CRM together, we've looked at, okay, what steps do we need to do? The 3 things that a fund manager has to think about when they're building their workflows. We've done all that hard work. Now what, right? Now is, like, what insights? What is our actionable data from this? So obviously I just showed you one as an output from a workflow. There's a whole bunch of information you can start to pull out. And, you know, the information you really need to think about pulling out as a fund manager is, yes, across our channels, who are we attracting? So in this case, we've got Yvette, and this is dummy data. And we can see from within our CRM, not only is she low-hanging fruit, but we can see that she's engaged with us over LinkedIn. She's downloaded a fact sheet. She's actually been on Twitter as well. So very, very quickly, we can see the kind of people we're attracting across our channels. And what's really useful about this information is it suddenly helps you work out where to dedicate your effort. Because invariably, there's no marketing team I've ever seen other than Aberdeen Asset Management who are overstaffed. And to a degree, even they probably will say, and if you're on your call, apologies, they're understaffed. The issue is marketing can just, there's so much to be done. Finding out what is working really, really quickly is critical, because then you'll have the maximum impact on you know, the AUM raising process. So once the first part is what you're crossing, what you're attracting across multiple channels, but it's also how are your channels performing. So in one place, having the ability to see how your website's performing, how your social's performing, and being able to drill down into this and actually see from a high level, how are you trending in the last period of time? That again is really important from a marketer's point of view. And also, the first person to get fired from any business is the marketing team, right? And the CMO is the most, in the C-level, the most precarious C-level position is head of marketing. So the ability for a marketer to go in and within a second see how their marketing is performing across all channels is absolutely critical. The next thing that's important is to not only see the cross-channel effectiveness, but the ROI you're generating across multiple channels. So in this case, the ability to see how many new prospects have you generated, how many of those are active, how many have you reached out to, how many new opportunities have you generated, and more importantly, who they are, is kind of another layer to the marketing information stack that you actually have to deliver to the business. So you can actually demonstrate, the impact you're having on AUM. This is, people say to me, oh, but we've got Google Analytics. It's like, yeah, you've got Google Analytics. Google Analytics is like the 1st of January where you say, I'm going to do 10 press ups a day, and come, the 30th of March, you're doing 5 press ups a day and it's ineffective. This is all about the pig-headed discipline that marketing teams need to have to actually demonstrate this. And why this doesn't work, because marketers, we are engineered, and that's a wrong word, not to have that discipline. We are sitting there in Dali's studio, in Picasso's studio, in Matisse's studio, just doing stuff. And this is the last thing on earth we want to do. But interestingly, just like they had patrons, our marketing patrons, the sales team, need to see this kind of information. So that is why, the perfect marketer, does he or she exist? Unknown. But having the ability to have this information to hand is absolutely important for a fund manager. Also, what themes are working across all channels is pretty useful to have as well. Now, as a devotee of Steve Jobs, and as we're kind of coming on to questions and answers, there's one more thing. And the one more thing is the ability to have this all running in real time. And what I've got here is a real-time dashboard from an imaginary client that actually shows you how campaigns are performing across multiple channels, how they are trending over time, the ability to drill down into, say, what part of the website is being more effective, what part of your email campaigns are being more effective, what funds are people showing more interest in. Oh, what a surprise, it's ESG. And, having this ability in real time, and this is a live demo, it's using, dummy data, but it's a live demo. And, when I show this to people, I showed this to somebody yesterday, and they're saying, wow, we've spent near enough $250,000 with consultants to build this, and we're not even there yet. And that is really interesting. And I kind of said, well, because we've done this for so many people, and we know what's really important to a marketer, you don't know yet because you haven't had that experience, and we have. And I'm not saying that makes us any better. It just means we're very good at just doing one thing. And, if anybody on this call wants the PIBX file that this uses, I'm more than happy to send it to you. But it really is useful for a marketer to actually see over a time period, and you can change the time period, what's working, what's trending, and then the ability to drill down. So Young PLC, okay, who are the guys in Young PLC that are accessing our information? What are they accessing? Makes a huge difference. So I've got a few more questions coming in. Okay, no problem. I'll do that. Marion, yeah. Marion, as one of our glorious customers, this is coming to you in our product. Do not fear. I know you're going to, that'll make you happy, Marion. So yeah, so that's that. And finally, you know, and just ending the webinar, if you just want a free 1 hour with me, more than happy, just look me up on LinkedIn, or you can, on the replay, you can book an hour with me. It's not about selling the product. I've got a very happy life with people not buying the product, because, you know, I've always said, you know, one more customer is, you know, is fantastic. I don't mind, but for me, I really care about people buying the right product. As a marketer, as a fellow marketer, as a fellow person painting in Pablo Picasso's gallery, you know, I want our work to be appreciated as marketers. I want us to pick the right product that's right for you. And if you just ask me nicely, I will actually send you a book. So I can't say fairer than that. So thank you very much for everybody for joining. Yeah, Sibel, pretty please, no problem. If you just email me your address, I will get Susan to send it over. And yeah, so any more questions? Hello, Chris. Yes, I will get to your question on speed of email delivery once I get after this. I'm just trying to see if there's anybody. I think Dion, yes, I'll send you the book. Have we got any more questions? Mitchell, thank you very much for your kind words. I'm glad you found that useful. Yes, Dion, we will send you the presentation if you're signed up. Our process is automated as well, by the way. What's the difference between invisible investors and the family office? That is really quite interesting, Torsten, because when you are looking, you know, obviously with a family office, managing a family's money or a group of families' money, what we've found is the challenge is the invisible investor are not the patriarch, the matriarchs, but what it is the people, the second generation of the money. And those are the invisible investors. And I found that to be quite surprising because, you know, the second generation are all digital natives, right? So they're not going to wait for the family office rep to call them or arrange a meeting, you know. And the second challenge with family offices is you've got to educate these guys who probably don't really know. Some of them, you know, the big worry of family offices is that in 3 generations, the money's going to go, right? So I think it was like 90% or 80% of family wealth is lost by the 3rd generation. So it's almost educating them in a digital context, and they become the investors, because, you know, what a family office doesn't want is the new patriarch or matriarch, which will be, you know, the 30, 40-year-olds who have already got friends who have already influenced them in some way to put their money into a crypto fund because Kanye West has decided that's what they should be doing. You're up against that, and that is a challenge in itself. So you know, get on TikTok, get on Clubhouse, get on Insta, and just see where the money, you know, the money for the people whose music you don't understand, where they're getting their, you know, influence from. Okay, right. So, do you have a template for tracking which platforms? So, hold on a second. So, when you mean platforms, Sabella, what do you mean? Template or advised template used for tracking which platforms we are successful. The best, so I'm assuming for sharing, oh yeah, so the best way to kind of see what content is working is to just use track links. So track links, you know, give you the ability to put a link in LinkedIn, Facebook, in your emails, in your landing pages, in your gated content, and aggregate that data. You can aggregate that in most high-end platforms. You can probably do it in HubSpot as well. You can do it in Hours. I'm just thinking, yeah, you could also do it in Google Analytics if you use the source medium UTM tag. So if you Google UTM tags, that's another fantastic way to do it. You've got to have a bit of knowledge. It's interface a bit clunky, but you can get your head around it. Yeah, so if you're sharing your content with people like Mercer and they're putting it on their platform, sending them unique links with urchin codes, Google that, urchin codes, is a good way to do it. And then you can pull that data into Google Analytics and then use Google Studio to pull that information out. So, so yeah, that's kind of one way to do it as well. Right. Just seeing if you've got any more questions. I just hope I haven't. If I've missed your question, just raise your hand for me. John, thank you for your kind words. Yes, you'll get a copy of the book. Right. Adobe professionals spoke about the future of email. They advise email marketing without attachment. Yeah, of course they will, right? Of course they will. Because if you send a blast of emails that doesn't have attachments, it can't be tracked, one. So their USP changes. Secondly, you are using their bandwidth to push a big fact sheet out, a big NAV out, okay? So of course they're going to do that. Of course they're going to force people to right click and download an image, right? That's what they're going to do. And that's fine if you are eBay or you are Nordstrom or you are, you don't really care about those activities. But when you're sending, high value communications for a high value transaction, and your users are not used to receiving a link, and we find that it's not that everybody wants to click a link. Yeah, links give you trackability, get that. But what physical attachments do, it just gives somebody the option to just download it from an email. And sometimes, whether people use it or not, there's that psychological thing of having the option. And that's why, we've kind of, and we're the only product that does this, is where we give people the ability to actually download the PDF. And the good thing is, by downloading the PDF, it can be watermarked. And in our industry, so obviously Adobe are kind of catering for all industries. They only care about customers who are spending lots and lots of money with them. And if you're a hedge fund and you need to watermark a PDF, or you've got to secure the PDF, you can only do it as an attachment. And that's why that is quite an important use case that most platforms ignore. But, as time goes on, as people's behaviors changes, I think, Adobe do have a point. But it's less to do with what's the hedge fund or asset manager use case versus, commercially. But also, if you're using a data room, then you want to use a link as well. So it kind of works both ways. So there you go, Torsten. So I hope that was useful. I'm just going to see if I missed any more questions. I've got one has come in. I can't see it. Let me have a quick look. Oh, here we go. Can I have a copy of it, David? Of course, you can have a copy of my book. I'll get Susan to send it out to you. And right, so we've got another queue of questions coming. Let's have a look. Right. Well, I'm now between your afternoon or your morning and going home for the weekend. We will be sending out a replay for this webinar. We have webinars every second but one Friday every month except December. I sincerely hope you found this useful. Like I said, marketing is all about, oh, here we go. How much should asset management be worried about cookieless world after Google? That whose question is that? Whose question was that? Puneet Sabharwal. Genius question. Genius question. So most of you will know that cookies are not supported by Google anymore very, very soon. And these are third-party cookies. So the likes of, if you're doing tracking with third-party products, you cannot do that anymore. So website engagement, email engagement, all that kind of stuff will stop if you're using third-party products. However, you can do it by first-party cookies. And first-party cookies are the cookies that are owned by your domain. So I'll give an example. If you are abc.com, abcfunds.com, and you're using a third party to do your website tracking, and their domain is xyz.softwarecompany.com, those cookies and that tracking will stop completely. However, if the cookie originates from abcfunds.com, remains within that domain, then you can track behavior and activity. And I don't know, Puneet, whether you're a plant from Profundcom, but there are only two companies that have officially come out and said that they support this. One is the David, that's Profundcom, that's us. And the second is Goliath, and that's Pardot. So David and Goliath have both agreed to do one thing together. So there you go. So fantastic. So that's a really good question. And I'm actually glad that I could actually answer it. And that's thanks to our tech team that kind of put that together. Of course, Sabella, you're our favorite person. So you will always get an invite. I don't know how many people think, you know, I've become annoying, but I do hope you find these valuable. I've got another question come through. Yes, David. No, that's just David. Yeah, of course, you had a copy of the book. Right, I'll ignore that one. No, my pleasure, Puneet. I'm just seeing, is there anybody else who's got any more questions? There's still about 100 of you here. So either you've kind of fallen asleep and I should get a job like Michael McConaughey doing late night stories on Calm, or Stephen Fry, who's got a very soothing voice. Well, all I can say, if there are no more questions, thank you all very, very much for joining. I do appreciate every single one of you being here. I really hope this helps you working your marketing magic, getting your CRM and digital marketing together, help you identify you know, the impact you're having on AUM. And ultimately, when you go for more budget, you can go and say, this is the impact I've had. So thank you all very, very much for your time. And I'll hopefully see you this time in a month's time. Stay safe, everybody.